In the time I've been researching and writing videos for Ask Alabama, I've learned one thing about folks in Alabama. A lot of people in Alabama don't give a crap about prisoners. Based on some of the comments I've read, I think there are a lot of people in this state that would be just as happy if we threw every 15-year-old kid busted for shoplifting down a well, which is why I think this is the question that got the most votes this round. Kenneth asks, why do people who are convicted and sentenced to death spend years on death row when the person is guilty? Well, Kenneth, the reason is, according to the Supreme Court, if we're going to throw people down a well, first we need to make damn sure we're throwing the right person. So the death penalty has been a hallmark of the U.S. justice system since pretty much the beginning. And in the early part of the 1900s, we were really in a groove, executing hundreds of prisoners each year. But in 1972, the Supreme Court noticed it was getting a little out of hand. Every state had their own rules for how to impose the death penalty, and in a lot of cases, there didn't seem to be any difference between cases where the death penalty was imposed and cases where it wasn't for the exact same crime. Those Supreme Court justices did point out one noticeable difference. So in the 1972 ruling Furman v. Georgia, the Supreme Court basically put the practice of capital punishment on ice until states could get their act together. For about 4 years, executions were suspended in the United States. But in the 1976 case, Gregg v. Georgia, the Supreme Court reopened the door to the death penalty if states were willing to meet certain standards. If someone were found guilty of a capital crime, there needed to be a separate hearing looking at the aggravating and mitigating factors of the crime before determining whether the defendant gets life in prison or the death penalty. And just as important, after someone is sentenced to death, they have to have every possible avenue to appeal the conviction. While I know some people tend to talk about the death penalty kind of flippantly, the U.S. government intentionally killing a citizen is a big deal and the courts have to treat it as such. And I don't know if you've heard, but the legal system isn't perfect, especially if you're poor. So if someone is given the death penalty, that case is automatically appealed to ensure there weren't any issues with the trial. Then the convicted person has further avenues to appeal, like say they were given insufficient counsel. The reason for all these appeals is because unlike a sentence of life in prison, in death penalty cases, if you find out after the fact that there was a mistake and you got the wrong guy, it's too late to take it back. The United States government, and by extension the citizens of the United States, just murdered an innocent person. It's because of this standard set forth by the Supreme Court in 1976 that so many years pass before a death sentence is issued and the actual execution takes place. In recent years, the delay has been exacerbated by legal debates over what is and isn't an acceptable method of execution under the Constitution. We made a whole video about that if you want to check it out, though it's pretty depressing stuff. Now, I know a lot of people don't like the additional burden on taxpayers to house death row inmates. But it's because of that additional tax burden that over 150 people who were found guilty, sentenced to death, but later exonerated are still alive. So try to think of it as the I don't have the blood of 150 innocent people on my hands tag. I'm Jonathan Soboleski for Reckon. If you like these videos and like what we're trying to do on Reckon, you can help us out by following us at Reckon by AL.com on Facebook and Twitter. And for even more information, you can subscribe to the Reckon newsletter by going to AL.com/Reckon. Thanks for watching.